Most men, even men who have been in intimate relationships for decades, have a significant blind spot when it comes to understanding what their partner is actually experiencing at the most intimate moments of their time together. Not because they do not care. Most men care enormously about their partner's experience, but because nobody has ever sat them down and explained clearly and clinically what is actually happening in a woman's body and mind during intimacy and specifically during the moment of penetration and what follows it. That blind spot has consequences, not dramatic ones usually, but quiet, cumulative ones. A gap that develops over time between what a man thinks is happening for his partner and what is actually happening. A series of small misalignments in pace, attention, and presence that reduce the quality of an intimate experience that could have been genuinely profound for both people. Today, I am closing that gap. I am going to walk you through what is actually happening in your partner's body and mind during the moments of intimate connection. The physiological changes, the neurochemical shifts, the psychological dimensions of vulnerability and trust, and what she is genuinely experiencing in those moments that she may never have found quite the right language to describe. And I am going to tell you clearly and practically what understanding all of this means for how you show up in your intimate relationship. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. Before we get into the content, please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications if you have not already. Every week I publish clinically grounded, genuinely useful content on men's sexual and relational health. Share this video with a man who deserves to have this understanding. And now let us begin. What is happening in her body before penetration and why this determines everything? To understand what a woman experiences during penetration, you first need to understand the physiological state her body needs to be in for that experience to be what it is capable of being. Because penetration experienced in a body that is fully and properly aroused is a qualitatively different experience from penetration experienced in a body that is not. And the difference is not subtle. Female arousal is a process that unfolds over time in a specific physiological sequence. It cannot be rushed without consequences. And understanding this sequence is the most important clinical knowledge a man over 60 can have about his partner's sexual experience. The process begins in the brain. Arousal is initiated by the nervous system in response to psychological, emotional, or physical stimulation, or some combination of all three. When arousal begins, the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system activates and drives increased blood flow to the pelvic region. This vascular response is the engine of everything that follows. As blood flow to the pelvic region increases, the clitoral complex, which includes not just the small external glands, but the full internal structure of cura and vestibular bulbs that extend along the vaginal canal, becomes engorged with blood. This engorgement increases the sensitivity of every nerve ending in the region dramatically. The vestibular bulbs, which lie on either side of the vaginal opening and along the vaginal walls, expand and create a narrowing and heightening of sensation at the vaginal entrance. The vaginal walls begin producing lubrication through a process called transudate, where fluid is pushed through the vaginal walls by the increased blood pressure in the surrounding pelvic vascule. Adequate lubrication is both a sign of arousal and a functional requirement for comfortable and pleasurable penetration. Simultaneously, a process called vaginal tenting occurs. The upper portion of the vaginal canal lengthens and expands, increasing the total internal depth and creating space. The cervix, which sits at the upper end of the vaginal canal, lifts away from the vaginal opening as the uterus rises slightly within the pelvis. This tenting effect is essential because without it, deep penetration will cause the penis to contact the cervix directly, which for most women is uncomfortable to genuinely painful. The pelvic floor muscles, which in their resting state maintain a degree of tonic contraction, progressively relax as arousal deepens. This relaxation is what allows the vaginal opening to soften and widen, making penetration not just possible, but welcoming and pleasurable rather than resistant. It is worth noting that pelvic floor relaxation is not automatic or involuntary in the absence of full arousal. It requires the specific neurological conditions of deep parasympathetic activation that only genuine unhurried arousal produces. A woman who is physically present but not psychologically safe, or who is aroused but has been rushed before the arousal process is complete, will not have fully released the pelvic floor musculature, regardless of how willing she appears externally. Her body has not yet received the internal signal that the conditions are right for full openness. This is why attentiveness to emotional safety is not merely a relational nicety. It is a physiological requirement. This entire sequence takes time. For a woman to be fully and properly aroused, meaning engorged, lubricated, tented, and pelvically relaxed, takes somewhere between 15 and 45 minutes of appropriate stimulation in most women. and this time frame tends to increase rather than decrease with age. For women in their 50s and 60s, hormonal changes associated with menopause and menopause affect the speed and completeness of this arousal process, typically requiring longer rather than shorter arousal time, and often requiring deliberate supplementation with lubricant, regardless of arousal level. When penetration occurs before this physiological preparation is complete, the experience is different in every measurable way. The vaginal walls are less sensitized. The tenting has not fully occurred, meaning depth of penetration causes discomfort. The cervix has not lifted, creating a risk of painful cervical contact. The pelvic floor is not fully relaxed, making penetration itself resistant rather than welcoming. And the neurochemical state of arousal has not reached the level at which all of the signals that make the intimate experience deeply pleasurable are fully active. For men over 60, understanding this is particularly important because of what it means for the pacing of intimate encounters. The urgency that many men feel around maintaining an erection. The anxiety that the window of opportunity might close can create a pressure to move quickly from arousal to penetration that directly works against the physiological preparation that makes penetration good for her. When a man rushes this process, he is not just being impatient. He is, without knowing it, ensuring a less satisfying experience for his partner than the same encounter could have provided with more patience and attentiveness. The practical implication is straightforward. Invest in the time. The 15 to 30 minutes of attentive, responsive foreplay that allow her body to complete the arousal process are not a preamble to the real event. They are a non-negotiable component of the real event, the part that determines whether what follows is genuinely pleasurable for her or merely tolerable, what she experiences during penetration, the physiology, and the psychology. When penetration occurs in a body that has been fully and properly aroused, the experience for a woman is neurologically and psychologically complex in ways that most men have never had explained to them. From a purely physical standpoint, the moment of initial penetration activates the dense concentration of nerve endings in the vaginal entrance and the engorged vestibular bulbs simultaneously. The vestibular bulbs, having filled with blood through the arousal process, are now pressed against the vaginal walls from the inside, which means that penetration creates indirect stimulation of the internal clitoral complex from within, in addition to any direct external clitoral stimulation that may be occurring. This is why penetration in a fully aroused woman produces sensation that is qualitatively different from and considerably more intense than penetration in a woman who is not yet fully aroused. The nerve structures that generate the most intense sensation are only fully sensitized and engaged after the complete arousal process has occurred. The pressure sensation of fullness that women describe during penetration is not merely a mechanical observation. It is a neurological event produced by the simultaneous engagement of multiple sets of nerve endings throughout the vaginal canal and pelvic floor, creating a distributed, deep sensory experience that is quite different from the localized surface intense sensation that characterizes external clitoral stimulation. Many women describe this internal sensation as grounding, the sense of something that settles and centers, rather than excites and stimulates in the way surface sensations do. From a neurochemical standpoint, the moment of penetration during a desired, safe, emotionally connected, intimate encounter triggers an oxytocin surge. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, is the neurochemical most directly associated with feelings of trust, safety, connection, and profound emotional closeness. Its surge in this moment is not metaphorical. It is a documented biological event that produces a specific emotional state. A sense of being fully met by another person of the gap between two separate individuals, being bridged in a way that feels physically and emotionally complete. This is why the emotional and relational context of the intimate encounter has such a powerful effect on what a woman experiences during penetration. Oxytocin release is amplified by emotional safety and genuine connection when she trusts you, when she feels genuinely desired, rather than merely used. When the relational environment between you is characterized by care and attunement, the neurochemical experience of penetration in that context is substantially richer than the same physical act in an emotionally cold or disconnected context. The practical implication is that the quality of your emotional presence in the time leading up to and during intimacy is not separate from her physical experience of it. It directly shapes her neurochemical experience. The man who is genuinely present, genuinely attentive, and genuinely invested in her experience is creating physiological conditions in her body through the amplification of oxytocin and the activation of her parasympathetic nervous system that produce considerably more pleasurable sensation than the same physical acts performed by a man who is distracted, hurried, or focused primarily on his own experience. the trust dimension, what she is giving you in that moment. There's something about the moment of penetration that most men have never been invited to think about from her perspective. And I want to address it directly because understanding it changes how a man shows up in intimate moments in a way that nothing else quite does. The physical vulnerability of penetration being entered by another person requires a degree of physical and psychological openness that has no male equivalent. To allow another person to enter your body requires trust. Not just the general trust of a relationship, but the specific trust of being in a state of complete physical openness with another person who is larger and physically stronger than you. The body has to actively choose to be permeable rather than defended. The muscles of the pelvic floor, which in their natural resting state are protective and contained, have to fully release and open. This does not happen involuntarily when trust is absent. The body knows the difference. For women over 50, who often carry the additional layer of body image anxiety that accompanies the physical changes of aging, this vulnerability is more consciously present than it may have been in younger decades. She is more aware of her own body. She is more aware of how she is being seen. And the degree to which she feels genuinely and specifically desired by you in this body at this age is directly relevant to how safe it is for her nervous system to be fully open. I want to say something here that I consider one of the most important things I share with the couples I work with. The physical changes of aging in women are real, and many women in their 50s and 60s have absorbed cultural messages suggesting that those changes make them less desirable, less worthy of intimate attention, less worth seeing. When a man of this age approaches his partner with genuine, specific, expressed desire for her as she actually is, the effect on her nervous system is profound. It tells her body that it is safe to be open, that the vulnerability is not a risk, but an invitation. And a body told that it is safe to be open is a body capable of experiencing pleasure that a defended, self-conscious body cannot access. When you approach this moment with genuine presence and genuine desire for her specifically, you are not just making her feel good emotionally. You are creating the neurological conditions under which her body can be fully open, fully responsive, and fully capable of experiencing the depth of pleasure that the encounter could offer. Emotional presence is not a courtesy. It is a physiological prerequisite. What she needs from you during penetration, pace, attention, and presence. Now that you understand what is happening in her body and her mind, let me translate this into practical guidance for how to be present in these moments in ways that honor and amplify her experience. The first and most important thing she needs from you is pace. Specifically, she needs initial penetration to be slow. This is not about timidity or passivity. It is about anatomy. The vestibular bulbs and the pelvic floor musculature, even when fully aroused, need the gradual progression of penetration to communicate welcome and accommodation, rather than surprise and resistance. Beginning slowly with the first entry being gentle and shallow and deepening gradually over the course of 1 to 3 minutes, gives her body the time to respond to each new increment of depth with appropriate neuromuscular relaxation and expanded arousal. Beginning too fast, regardless of how aroused she appears, compresses a process that is designed to unfold incrementally. It bypasses the gradient of sensation that makes the transition from outside to fully inside a continuous and layered experience, reducing it to a single binary event. That reduction costs both of you something. The second thing she needs is your attention to her responses. Her breath is your most reliable real-time guide. Deepening, slowing, and rhythmic breathing indicates that her arousal is building and her body is responding positively. Held breath or shallow, tense breathing indicates that something needs to slow down or adjust. Her muscle responses, the relaxation or engagement of her pelvic floor, thighs, and abdomen, communicate the same information in somatic terms. The woman who reaches for you, draws you closer, and moves to meet your movements is communicating clearly that she is receiving what she needs. The woman who becomes still, holds her breath, or creates subtle distance is communicating equally clearly that she needs a different pace, a different angle, or more time. This is not a complicated system to read. It requires only one thing, that you are actually paying attention. Not to your own sensations, not to your own performance, not to the internal monologue about whether you are doing well enough, to her breath, her movement, the quality of her relaxation or tension. When a man's attention is genuinely directed outward rather than inward during intimacy, he receives continuous, rich, accurate information about his partner's experience. When it is directed inward toward performance monitoring and self-evaluation, he loses access to all of that information and is essentially operating blind. Most men, particularly in the heat of the moment, are attending primarily to their own sensations. The shift toward attending primarily to her sensations and her responses is the single most impactful change most men can make in their intimate lives, and it becomes more rather than less available with age. The urgency and performance anxiety of younger sexuality tends to narrow attention inward. The greater experience and reduced performance pressure of sexuality in the 60s and beyond opens the possibility of genuine outward attentiveness that younger men rarely access. The third thing she needs is your consistency once she is building toward orgasm. Female orgasm depends on the maintenance of a consistent stimulus pattern in the period approaching climax. The nerve endings and arousal pathways that are producing the building response lock into the specific stimulation pattern they are receiving. And any significant change in pace, depth, angle, or pressure in the final stages of arousal disrupts that pattern and can reduce or eliminate the orgasm that was building. When she communicates verbally or non-verbally that she is close, the most important thing you can do is maintain exactly what you are doing without variation. Do not speed up. Do not change angle. Do not introduce novelty. Simply maintain the consistent attentive presence of exactly what has been working. This is one of the most common and most consequential mistakes men make. Changing technique at precisely the moment when consistency is the only thing required. The emotional aftermath. Why presence after matters as much as presence during. The experience of intimacy for a woman does not end at the moment of orgasm or the moment of physical separation. The neurochemical state that penetration and intimacy have produced continues to influence her experience for a meaningful period afterward. And the quality of your presence in that period is directly relevant to the depth of connection she carries away from the encounter. Oxytocin elevated throughout the intimate encounter remains elevated in the post-orgasmic period. This is the period of greatest emotional openness and vulnerability in the entire intimate experience. It is also the period that women most consistently describe as the one in which they feel most or least connected to their partner, depending entirely on his behavior. A man who remains present after intimacy, who does not immediately disengage, reach for his phone, or shift into practical logistics, who allows the warmth and closeness to continue for even a few unhurried minutes, is giving his partner something neurochemically meaningful. He is telling her nervous system in the language that the nervous system most clearly understands, "You are safe here. This connection is real, and you are not just used for a physical purpose." That message delivered consistently over the course of her relationship shapes the depth of her trust and openness in every subsequent intimate encounter. The inverse is also true. The man who disengages immediately, who physically or emotionally withdraws in the post-intimacy period when she is most neurochemically primed for connection, is sending a message that her nervous system registers as clearly as any verbal communication. That message, also delivered consistently over time, teaches her nervous system to protect itself from the vulnerability of intimate openness. It creates a gradual closing that both partners feel and that progressively reduces the quality of the intimate connects